Welcome back to the table. This is Finding a Tori, a weekly TTRPG podcast where three lifelong friends and avid gamers sit down to discuss the news, stories, and experiences impacting the TTRPG community. This is Malcolm. I'll be your host this episode, and I'm here with Arcadia.
Hello.
We'd both like to remind you that the Finding a Tori podcast is always presented by Wordleaf Media. Visit Wordleaf Media at wordleafmedia.com.
Woohoo.
Woohoo.
Now, you only said I'm here.
Because I'm no liar.
Which we have to point out to our listeners who know better. I mean, we just said we're a 3-person podcast.
Where's my bird?
Tori is not with us today.
First time we're without Tori, and this was a heartfelt and long-term discussion to figure out what we were going to do here. But today we've got kind of a broad conversation topic for you guys, and it's going to kind of kick off maybe a multi-episode, in-depth look at something that we feel is pretty impactful to the TTRPG community.
Very much so. And just so everybody's aware, you know, Tori is not here for truly valid reason.
Truly valid reasons. Truly
valid reason is that instead of talking about gameplay, she has to gameplay.
She's got a gameplay. And like when you've got a table reservation, there's no question, because otherwise we're just talking about stuff. It was the rabbit hole is there. Let me jump down it. We had a group chat this week as a table about changing some things about what we do at our table to get together and to make those dates more sticky, and the passion for the hobby can sometimes get in the way of actually
sitting down to the table to play
the fucking game. And it was kind of pointed out to me and to all of us that we really enjoy the podcast and everything that goes along with it. We have a few other endeavors that are of great importance, and some of us, you know, we go to work and, you know, pay bills and stuff too.
Wait. We have jobs?
But
damn, I knew I was forgetting something.
For the moment. Anyway, so she is not with us for super valid reasons. We are going to miss her on this episode.
Very.
And maybe miss me on another because of other valid things. But what we're going to do is kind of take a 2 or 3 part look at. I'm shaking my head quizzitively over at Arcadia.
Is that what we planned?
Did we agree? Okay, we're back at 1. We're at 1. To highlight something that is, depending on who you talk to, some really big news with a release of a game in the TTRPG arena.
There's a new game.
And I feel like there's always a new game. Like, if you follow indie creators, you know, there's a new game just about every day. But this one is, for all of the reasons that we'll list and get into, a little bit more of a splash, a lot of positions being taken on it. And we're going to dive into it probably from a fairly high level today, broad brush strokes, and discuss some of the things that make it impactful. And then I think that when we have...
Why are we talking about this?
Why the hell are you guys... And I think when Tori gets back with us on the next episode, hopefully, we're going to have her come and weigh in on how the mechanics of this game are relatable and non-relatable to other systems that you may or may not be familiar with, and not just the one that everybody's going to compare it to. So lots to discuss, lots to get into, and I know that she's been researching furiously. You, up till the time where we pushed the button, you and I were both getting our last looks in on things. Where do you want to start with the topic of...
I was going to say, drop the bomb. We've been...
Daggerheart. Is it not all of the things? And it just seems to be the thing that if you go into the social media realm right now, a lot of people. There's a lot of...
For the past, to be fair, like, this is not breaking news. I mean,
right.
They released it in May 20th of this year, and they were doing open sort of beta play testing since about March. Like, this has been out there. People have been talking about it for a while. Mm-hmm. But within the last month is really it's open and available for everyone to get the official rules and start
June
playing if they
5th,
want to.
I think was the drop. So we're definitely not, you know, coming to you live. But it's something that, as it has happened and some of the first dominoes have fallen from this release, it's become a little bit brighter in the sun of impactful stories once again in the community.
Yep.
Where did you feel comfortable starting on this, and what questions do you think we should answer with our time today?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest pieces around this is the obvious question you've got, for people who don't know, Daggerheart is a new game system that is released by Darrington Press, and Darrington Press is the press media company for Critical Role.
It is their game creation arm, and to be fair, this is not their first foray into game publishing. They've got a library out there, and
so everybody knows, this is not a sponsored podcast. We have no affiliation with Darrington Press or
I am not
Critical
depositing
Role.
Team
But I mean, it's fair to
Darrington money
say
right now. But no, it's a objective analysis.
Yeah, and so as an arm of Critical Role, everybody knows Critical Role. Up to this point, Critical Role is played within the Dungeons and Dragons TTRPG setting
framework. Absolutely.
And so I do think one of the just very obvious elephant in the room, not quiet.
There's a few of them. It's getting crowded.
No, thing here is simply, is this designed and meant to be a direct competitor of Dungeons and Dragons? Is it meant to simply be another TTRPG in the market?
Sure.
And really how... I think the question that's really being discussed a lot is how will it impact Dungeons and Dragons versus maybe some of the other TTRPG systems that are out there.
Right. And I think that it's a good question that maybe has been answered in interviews and could only be answered by those heads of the company at Darrington is, what's your market push here? Where do you see your product in the marketplace? And I think that there's a few things that have happened that have kind of tip the hand as to what they expect to do there, and one of them is the other large pachyderm in the studio. But another one is that they've done a very calculated multi-stream launch with this.
Yeah,
this was a funded project. This was a big project. This was something that did strategic release through different formats, different platforms at different times. You had I think over 100 LGS local gaming establishments had release parties coordinated through, production and publication.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was watching some reviews on it, and one of the people that was doing a review commented about the fact that, Darrington Press is not as big as WotC. They're a smaller, more startup type company. And so therefore didn't have maybe some of the same resources to do certain pieces as WotC would have, which I'm sure all of that is true to a degree. The flip side of that is Critical Role's not hurting for money, and that you can tell simply by the production value, by the how you're talking about the release of it and how it was coordinated and orchestrated.
Advertisements around.
This was not, in my opinion, this is not a typical small company production release.
I'll agree with you on all points. I will say that when you come to WotC money, I think that you do have something that a smaller company, even with great resources, might not, and that is going to be established distribution agreements so that you can get your book more places more quickly.
Okay, question about that.
Yeah.
Because my immediate follow-up on that is, though, that you have had Critical Role modules with, for D&D, within those stores, within those distribution channels that WotC has been distributing in. So do you really think that impacts them?
I don't know,
as much?
because what you said at the end kind of is a hook for me. WotC was distributing those.
Yeah.
This is the first time that I've seen, at least, like, I'm sure that they can do it. I'm not trying to say that they had to go with wagons and drop 10 books off places.
Excuse me, sir. Will you sell my stuff?
that in that arm of the business, one of those things that is so tough to maintain and really matters on margins is if you're doing a big color, full art print book.
Which, for everybody who hasn't seen it,
it's gorgeous.
It is. I mean, all of their products so far that they've put out are gorgeous and in competition with any large company release of a game system that I've ever seen.
So you saw what would be considered a major market advertising and promotional push to this. Not only do you have the books, you have the cards, you have the token. It's a whole, game system that comes. We're used to, grabbing the manuals off of the books shelf and being fine there. This is a whole sort of box system. So I imagine that the production costs on are high. But they also strategically went and got the biggest names in game development right as this was happening.
And I get that. And just so everybody knows, we're not going to dive too much into that today. It is something we want to dive into more. We just think it has there's enough to discuss there that we're going to do a separate episode on it.
And I brought it up only because it was one of those factors that told me that this release was different in their mind.
Agreed. The big thing that I find interesting with it is that they did get those names, but they did not have them during creation of this first release.
And to the point that you were talking about where they had beta going back in May, I think that they made changes to the game up to what they could to the final release date.
Yeah, and actually beta started in March.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're good. But yeah, absolutely. And they have all over their website repeatedly please make certain that if you are playing this, they invited people to live stream play, they invited people to put stuff out on social media, all this other kind of stuff, but with the caveat of saying this is the beta test version because rules are still going to change, and
probably will based on the feedback from that community that's engaging the game, and I'm sure that they had. And they do this, I know with the video games, is that you have DLCs and you give certain either creators or experts or players early access prior to beta. Right. And so they're getting a lot of feedback, and who knows how long, we're talking about very talented individuals had any input into that.
Yeah.
But I also think that the only other thing I'll say on the topic, because we'll give it a proper drill down with future time, is that it gives them the option and it gives the community the expectation this will be a series. You're going to have more versions of this.
Right.
It positions it in my mind to be a flagship property for Darrington.
And that is where I think the release of information in regard, at this time of bringing over those game creators, and for people who are not aware, it is the fact that a handful of weeks ago we had the news that a couple of the biggest creators from WotC,
Chris Perkins.
Yep, Chris Perkins, and it's Crawford,
it's
right?
Jeremy Crawford.
Jeremy Crawford. I couldn't remember the first name. That Perkins and Crawford had left WotC. They have been huge game creators there for Dungeons and Dragons, and are very well known in the community for building the game. That they left WotC. That was announced a few weeks ago, and then now, just recently, they were announced as joining Darrington Press. And I think the timing of that is to the point that, okay, here we've released this game, and now we've got these other game creators on board. This is not a one-time release. This is not something that's going to go away. We intend to build a game, have a system that is going to live and grow and become popular.
And went and invested money in the two strongest names,
right.
I'd say probably in that industry.
Right.
You get a lot of feedback about this, and a lot of people think it's an absolute coup. There was a whole bunch of turmoil at WotC going around. Who knows if you weren't in the boardroom on those things, but the fact that those guys probably could have stayed if they wanted to. Right. I'm assuming with WotC and continue multiple versions going forward of D&D or countless other projects. So the fact that they had that option and chose this one says a lot. And so you hear words like a coup and that, this is going to start the, a TTRPG showdown for supremacy. I don't know about that.
Okay, so that is a topic I really want to dig into, and it's to that idea of, what is this purposeful? Are they trying to be the competitor to Dungeons and Dragons? I know we've talked about very briefly in the past on other episodes, the simple percentage of the market of TTRPG players that are Dungeons and Dragons players. There's so many TTRPG games, but Dungeons and Dragons, hands down, blows all of them out of the water.
For market share,
market share,
yeah, and renown.
Yeah, and so is this a game system that can actually compete and take some of that market share? And even actually, I mean, there are people talking about it being the downfall of Dungeons and Dragons.
Now,
I would love to dig into this, because first off, I'm going to say I don't think that is a possibility. Okay. I think you have too many of us who are still going to live for a few decades that have been playing Dungeons and Dragons since we were kids in the 80s and aren't going to give up Dungeons and Dragons. We love Dungeons and Dragons. That doesn't necessarily mean we won't play another TTRPG game system. Lovely fact about the TTRPG world is that you don't just have to play one game. You can play all the games. You can play 2 of the games. You can play any number of the games that you want.
And there's indie creators out there tailoring things to whatever your favorite aspect is.
But I'm glad you said that, because that is where I think currently Daggerheart is going to struggle being a competition to Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And it is because wonderful that they did, but they've gone down the route of putting out an SRD and a open gaming license, mm-hmm. and giving all of that information and providing that to the community for third-party creators.
Right.
But there's a lot of uproar about their SRD right now, or their OGL, because it is not quite, but almost as restrictive to third-party creators as WotC's was during their gigantic OGL scandal, which the entire community fought back, got outraged at WotC. People left the game. I mean, it was a massive outcry about it. And so you have some people who are aware and have looked at this gaming license that Darrington has put out for Daggerheart, and they are as outraged by it. But you don't hear that outrage in the community in general.
One of the things that I think you have to weigh in when you have that conversation is who is at the top of decision-making for WotC on that gaming license at the time. Who's at least in the room. And people have a little bit of hesitancy when they see a restrictive OGL right under the banner of Perkins and Crawford go to Darrington. It feels like they're being done again. Not that we're hanging the whole thing on them or any part of it, but they were certainly there at the time where there was the, the question that I also wanted to ask too, before we get too far down the road of this competitive nature and the versus D&D, I think the question is it the same game? Has to be asked.
Oh, yeah.
Are you really, you know what I mean? Is it really trying to take the space, or is it carving out something new in this narrative structure space to where people are going to play both? You know what I mean? I know that's two things true, but...
So I don't know. I don't want to dig down into a ton of the mechanics.
Me either.
My personal take on it is that it is... Actually, I read one thing in the community and I liked this response. It's D&D and it's not D&D. and it sounds sort of ridiculous, but that is the most honest assessment I saw. It's very valid.
I got one it's so valid, and other people are echoing that. I found one that said, it's like somebody looked at D&D and said, what if this was written by someone who grew up playing it, but didn't assume we wanted the same person to experience it forever?
Okay, yeah.
They say it's an evolution of the game that speaks to what gamers want more now that is not being provided in traditional 5e, newer rules, or the rest of the easily accessible gaming sphere.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about is it the same game or a different game, the trappings are the same. You are playing in a high fantasy world. When you look through the core rule book, you see all the same beasts and monsters and classes, and they call it ancestry, but it's the same types of species or races, to use your characters.
So it's familiar and adjacent.
And they've changed some of it. It's not identical,
sure,
but it's familiar. It is, a hobbit and a halfling.
Walk into a bar.
So it's going to feel, at least from what I saw, very much Dungeons and Dragons. The actual gameplay, the mechanics are different. Mm-hmm. And to the idea of whether or not it addresses what people want but aren't getting out of D&D, I think that just depends on your targeted niche market. I think there are some people who would really love the changes that they've made. And one of the things that Darrington highlights all over Daggerheart is that it is this narrative first way of playing, that it is much more about the narrative and the collaborative story building, which is wonderful.
And it echoes their product from Critical Role, from the live play. The way that they've run their D&D table has always been a narrative, voice actor, dramatic heavy thing. And that's what people in the last how many years, there's been a deluge of new interest into the hobby that has come from that product.
Yep. And I this is just my own personal opinion.
Please.
Have not sat down to play the game yet, just so everybody's aware.
But we are
going to run a couple of sessions and sort of play test the game. So and we'll do a follow up on that. But having not played the game yet, for me, and this could be familiarity, but for me, Dungeons and Dragons can be a narrative first. We have talked about that so many times on this show about how at our table we are collaborative storytelling.
You sprinkle salt on the rules and you grow the story.
Right. And so Dungeons and Dragons can be a story narrative first game. It doesn't have to be if that's not how you want to play at your table. It can be, and I know we've played games actually, depending on the DM, things like that, where it is much more driven by, how the DM laid out what was going to happen.
Right.
There's all sorts of different ways to play. It feels to me that Daggerheart is going to be, by its nature, a narrative story building game. And based on its mechanics and structure, you can't really not play it that way. And that's not a bad thing. It's just less options. Right.
It feels like they took, once again, that style of gameplay at the table and said, let's not do that within the framework of a D20 system. Let's find another system that accentuates that portion of TTRPG interaction more. And once again, I think it was a community response. I think that we have to take a break. It feels weird because there's only two of us here. Like, this is what happens when you're Tori-less. But I think that we kind of want to come back and continue addressing some of the questions. One of the things that I want to get to is, once again, what are they trying to do with the game and what does it look like it's going to impact on? And then some of the reasons why now. You know what I mean? Why didn't we have a Daggerheart, 3, 4, 5 years ago? And I think that there's some obvious answers there and there's some not so obvious answers there. But we do push towards time for a break, and we will be right back on Finding Atoria. This episode of Finding Atoria is brought to you by Wordleaf Media. The Finding Atoria podcast is looking for guests for our upcoming episodes. Are you or someone you know passionate about the TTRPG community and have a story to share? If so, contact us on our socials or reach out at wordleafmedia.com patreon.com/findingatoria. And now back to your program.
Hey guys, welcome back after our break to Finding a Toria. We are so grateful to have you listening to us. And hey, want to put a shout out that it is Free RPG Day.
It is. Happy Free RPG Day to those who celebrate.
It is so wonderful that that is out there. And just a reminder to our regular listeners that we are without our Tori bird today.
Our three-piece is a duo today.
Yes, but we're having fun.
And she shall return once again off on fantastic adventures, I'm sure.
Right, I can't wait to hear about her adventure.
We should press her for some highlights from that gaming session. But
Yeah.
we were moving forward with some topics that, and I have to admit, I get really excited about the breadth of this thing. So I move from one topic to another a little bit too quickly. So bring us back around, Arcadia, to where we wanted to have a discussion.
Sure. So we'd brought up a couple of topics, got to dive down into some of them a little bit. I wanted to bring us back around to this third-party content and how the OGL that Darrington Press has put out there impacts. I had sort of alluded to it earlier that I think it could make their, I guess, competition with Dungeons and Dragons, and who knows whether, how significantly they're out to pull from Dungeons and Dragons, or if they're just looking to expand the TTRPG universe, whatever that might be. But a lot of people in the community do think that there is obviously some competition with Dungeons and Dragons for this.
And this affects it. Like you said, no matter on what scale, they're trying, this impacts their market position significantly in our minds.
Correct. So my thought is that, as we talked about earlier, that the gaming license that they have put out there is very restrictive. Mm-hmm. And so much so that it can, in my opinion, limit independent creators, third-party creators, from playing in the world of Daggerheart, or,
right?
From creating in the world of Daggerheart. And the reasons for that are multiple at a very high level. Just things such as not 100%, but I would say about 99%. Mm-hmm. If a third-party creator creates something in the world of for the Daggerheart game, Darrington Press can basically take that content and sell it as their own. The wording that they have is, unless it is an exact identical without modification.
Okay.
So if I was watching a silly video on this, and the lady put up just some really ridiculous, like, you create an ancestry and, mm-hmm. and they simply change a piece of the name.
Right.
That's a modification.
Sure.
Everything else can be the same, and then they sell it as their own.
Right.
And just as an example, not that this can't be covered under WotC's OGL and
right.
everything like that, but like, to the idea of Hobbit and Halfling.
Sure.
We changed the name. It's no longer the same thing.
Right, but it quacks like a duck, walks like... Absolutely. So the way that can be restrictive to their growth is almost obvious when you put it into those terms, is you're just not going to have access to that community of indie game developers and people that want to create in that space.
Yeah, I think in watching and reading some of the reviews about their gaming license, what you end up with is, it's not that anything they've done is wrong or illegal. It's just incredibly restrictive, and it protects Darrington Press, which is
what it's designed
to do. And my view on it, though, is that if I were a third-party creator, be hesitant to play in that world, because at this point in time, if I created something, I might not make money on it because they take it over.
Correct.
And I don't have, based on their current OGL, I don't really have any path to fight for my rights as the creator of that.
Right.
And so that allows Darrington some really good paths to continue developing their world, how they want it to be developed.
Right.
But it does limit, I think, the number of independent creators who are going to want to expand that world as well, which the idea there is that then we have less world. We have that, that was
Right.
the big argument for Dungeons and Dragons, is that we lose something of the beauty of the game when
the growth.
fewer people are adding to it.
And from a strictly business sense, it looks like from that landscape, from an indie game creator's purview, from that business angle, they're making it difficult to do business there.
Right.
So almost like certain cities and states are known for their ease of working with entrepreneurs and small business owners, and others are not. If you just look at it from a market landscape, and I'm putting my dollars, resources, and creativity into third-party content, there's a lack of guarantees. There's a new product, and there's some highly restrictive space to work in. So you may not get the embracing of that community early on. And we know that OGLs change. We know that, and I think you brought up a good point about it being so early in the world that they may want that heightened level of control, because not only is it the game, this is also going to influence every other arm that Darrington, the Critical Role, have. And they may need to maintain a stranglehold on that world and those stories to meet those other media market, ventures.
Right, absolutely. And I think one of the differences, because I said earlier, when you had the OGL scandal with Dungeons and Dragons and WotC, the whole community was just in an uproar. And you're seeing people who are in that third-party creator realm being frustrated and upset about this OGL, commenting about how bad it is. But you don't have a community uproar.
Right.
And I do think a part of that is it's a brand new system. You don't have already existing businesses creating in that world who are now getting negatively impacted.
Right.
Now it's a beginning. And so people can choose whether or not they want to participate
The OGL crisis was a punitive decision to third-party creators.
It would have put businesses out of business.
Right now, there's not a market to be negatively impacted. They're starting there.
Right.
So will it make it less attractive to join for some people? Absolutely. I think you're right. And what a good conversation to have. And not to gloss up a pig, because all of those things are ugly when you get into legality versus creativity. But if you're Darrington, what a good problem to have.
Right.
That there is that wild swath of popularity. I'm glad that we got back to that topic. I think there's tons to talk about on it more. Hold
on. Yeah. And just to throw out there for people, we've been throwing a lot of acronyms around, like the Open Gaming License, which is OGL, and the Systems Requirements Document, which is SRD, and things like that. I just want to, and talking about the OGL
crisis
scandal we have an entire episode that goes into that whole situation. So if you're curious and want to know more, go ahead and check that episode out.
They can get that at www.wordleafmedia.com/finding a Tori. Our entire library is out there, and I recommend that's a good listen. And we did have Tori on that episode. That's why we're going to do more in depth with Tori on this topic in another episode. But I like the conversation about how that community, because that's a big piece of what influences WotC's products now, is a third party, and making peace with them. They found a way to make it not only profitable, but growing the community. So you have entities that bring in otherwise unaffiliated players to the WotC world because of those things. I just think it's too different. You have the Goliath, and you have the infant there.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to spend all of our time on this. I wanted to go back to some of the questions you raised right before our break.
I did.
Specifically, you were questioning why now?
I think it's a fair question, and some of it may be super obvious in that game development takes time, and getting the right people on board takes time, and this. They also have put out a bevy, Darrington Press, a bevy of other great games that have had their own successes. So I'm not sitting there stamping foot and going, where have you been? But I think that there is strategery behind this launch.
If they're a smart business, definitely.
Very smart business. You are looking at what may be, and I don't know this business well enough to say whether it is or not, but you may have found a cap in YouTube followers. You may have been reaching the pinnacle for other things, and it was a good time to go all in this way. And I think that doing it after the release of the 2024 rules and the changes that they made system-wise.
That was what I was going to bring in.
You are creating a clear alternative to.
Yes, and it's at a point in time when people are, I guess in the sales world, you know, it's at a moment when people might be looking. They might be a little dissatisfied. People don't like change.
Yep.
And so some will stay with the old system. Some will enjoy the new system. And some will be dissatisfied and want to find something else. And this is the perfect time to present to them something else that is almost the same.
And I don't want to harp on it as a one-to-one example because I don't know the details, but it feels very much that when Pathfinder did their...
Yes.
It was at the same juncture where we had a release of a version that was different in a lot of ways to players and accentuated some of the things that they did not like about the system at the time. And it was a clear, hey, we're mad too. We're going to do it the right way. We're over here. So if you're done with WotC and this whole and having to pay out the nose, then come on over here. And we've got the thickest, math heaviest book you've ever seen in your life, and you can play. But I think that
and again, to your point about this game addressing things that the community is asking for, you know, at the time, Pathfinder was addressing some of the things that the community was looking for.
Because when you're in business, you see a need in the market and you take advantage of it. And I think that that's what they've done here. You're also riding a crest of popularity that is Critical Role, that has just permeated every part of it. And there's a conversation to be had that I don't know that we need to get too far into of how much of that community is holding up the WotC D&D community.
Yeah, and this cycles us back around to our very first question, which is where I wanted to come to close everything up today,
right?
Which is, you know, what kind of impact does this actually have on Dungeons and Dragons? And that is a core question. I think there is a lot of evidence metrics, if you wanted to go out there and dig into them, to see how Critical Role has influenced the rise of the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons over the last handful of years. And obviously, as it becomes more popular, that feeds into WotC and the game and the business side of it. You know, not just feeding Critical Role, you know, for their watchers and everything, but it has brought people to the game. It has brought people to the community. But if those people are in the game and in the community because they are Matt Mercer fans, if they are in the game and in the community because they love Critical Role and they want to play that, how many will stay because they got introduced to the game and now they love the game,
right?
Versus how many will say, oh, well, you know, I came into this because I really loved Critical Role, and now Critical Role has moved over to this other system, and I'm going to try out this other system and follow them.
So nobody knows those numbers, I'm sure, but that's the question we're asking. I think that what we can tell is that because of the numbers that surround Critical Role, and you're talking about, you know, 2 million followers on YouTube. You're talking about Twitch episodes that have over 100,000 average live viewers. The people in I don't know if I've got a source in Polygon said that even if 5% of their viewers become regular Daggerheart players, that's a larger player base than most indie RPGs ever dream of.
Yeah,
so
it's huge.
I think that there's something to be said in a really crummy analogy about the indie game creator being a hill, and that, you know, that I expect Daggerheart to be a mountain. I think that they're going to pull enough, and they don't have to be Mercerites. They don't have to just love, but
people looking for a different game
that like that narrative structure. That's what they're selling the difference on,
but still want to play in that high fantasy realm.
Correct, but that's their Coke to the Pepsi.
Yep.
And I think that you're going to get a big swath that go, and I think you're going to have some people that are just not happy with the 5e product in the 2024, the recent versions, and would love something new.
And also, I think same as with Pathfinder Split, you're also going to have those people who have been continuing to play Dungeons and Dragons because they didn't like the alternative, but they're so fed up with WotC. There's so many people in the community that feel like WotC is just money grabbing, that they've commercialized the game so much that it's not really enjoyable to participate in that realm. But they do it because they want to play the game and they love the game.
Right.
And you may find that group of people would rather support Darrington than Wizards of the Coast.
And they're saying within those numbers, if even a small percentage roll that way, it's a huge launch. It's a massive game, but at the same time, to that mountain, which would Daggerheart we expect to be in the market, you're still standing next to an Everest, which is D&D worldwide WotC, the standard. I just don't think you sink that boat, and I don't know that that's what they're trying to do.
No, I don't think so either. I like the analogy that you're bringing forward of hill, mountain, Everest, because I do think it is unfair. I've seen a couple of comparisons of the Daggerheart promotion to other indie third-party, release type things, and honestly, that's apples and oranges. You are not comparing. Critical Role has such brand recognition. It has such a gigantic following. This is not a small startup.
No.
People don't really know it's so much
indie
business
about them.
They are very well established. Their brand is very well established.
Darrington Press has once again a library of already successfully published games. These are not babes in the woods.
When you're producing cartoons on Amazon, you're not a small
and you have the
potato
war chest to pay Perkins and Crawford. First of all,
right.
They're not doing this for
exactly
gratis.
Right.
You're out there commanding the biggest names in the industry.
Yeah.
No way are you the dwarf, but at the same time,
you are also not Everest.
Sure.
From the foundations of Dungeons and Dragons to Hasbro's buying out WotC, you have longevity and you have massive market share. And I do think that I think Hasbro has it on their radar. I think they're going to see a piece of their market share decline.
Sure.
I don't think it's going to be enough to swat a fly at for them. But it
I
will
don't
be
know the
enough
numbers.
for Darrington to be successful, is my opinion.
And I think they're going to be able to do more with it. I mean, immediately you've already got live play of their first module, and that's out, and that's getting viewers, and that's getting traction, and you have what was a very strategically well-approached release of the game, even though you've got some sold-out situations in places. That's kind of what you want.
Yeah, but okay, so to that, and we talked about the third-party piece being restrictive. The flip side of that coin is that player access is so open and available. I mean, I'm not going to say I've played every TTRPG out there. I haven't, but the fact that they have just released this, and you can, if you use the SRD, and if you use the tools that they've provided for free on their website, you can get a quick start campaign playing to get introduced to the game for free. You do not need to buy that core rule book. There is enough information in the SRD that you could take that and be able to play the game. Now, it might be more complicated and challenging to do it that way. It's probably worth the $30 for the PDF or the $60 for the core, kit. But if you don't have that money to spend, if you just want to try out the game because you're not certain if you're going to like it, you as a player, your table can access this game for free to get introduced to it.
And experience it.
That is brilliant.
And I don't know that WotC has not done something similar with versions and drops, but if you're putting a new product out there, the last thing you want to do is make it less than ultimately accessible. And you think about it, everybody that tries out the game, whether they play the game or not, there's going to be a link to the live play somewhere on that. There's going to be, they're just so multi-channel, and they're not just doing book sales. So they don't have to push the units to see the return in that business.
And yet, Agreed, wholeheartedly. And yet, their initial release of their core set sold out so fast. People couldn't find it anywhere.
Yep.
So you have free access, and yet they are selling what they created and demand for more. So, well done.
No, I mean, nobody can fault them. I think that it's been a fantastic release. It's been newsworthy. We're talking about it. We're going to talk about it some more on another episode. What do we have anything left on our checkity checklist that we said that we would?
No, I would love to hear from people, though, because
Yes.
we are going to be putting a few more episodes out about this, diving into topics in more detail. And just to give a shout out to what those episodes are going to be, we are going to dive into the game creators of Perkins and Crawford, sort of their history, their background, why it isn't such a big deal that Darrington Press now has them. We are going to dig into the mechanics of the game. We're going to play test the game and come back to the table with our feedback about it, so people can sort of get their own view of, is this something I want to try?
Sure.
I want to just throw out there, I know we mentioned it already, but especially in talking in regards to a competition with Dungeons and Dragons and all that kind of stuff. Right. Let's just throw it out there. The world of TTRPG is not an either or. I can play Daggerheart and I can play Dungeons and Dragons and I can play Shadowrun and I can play, whichever VTM and all of the brilliant TTRPGs that are out there.
Right. You don't have to punch your ticket one way or the other. If it's good for your table, play the game. I can't wait to experience more. We're going to talk about the compare and contrast between it and other TTRPGs we know, and maybe what it is, what's amalgamated of. But we'll do that on another episode, another time.
And hey, reach out to us on our social media. We are on Insta, we are on Facebook, and you can find us at Finding a Toria on those platforms. Reach out to us if you've played Daggerheart already, if you've dug into the game a little bit, if you have comments on some of the stuff we've touched on here and talked about today, or more insight that we don't have, we would love to hear from you. So leave us a message.
We'll shout you out also, and thanks so much for being at the table with us. See you next week, guys.
Take care.